Alright YouTube, it's time for the Occult video 86 on Jinn, Genies, rural spirits, everything sort of related to this, sort of the outland spirits that dwell in natural spaces as opposed to those that have a more urban setting, although Jinn sort of fit in both. It depends on the era, depends on what text or like Imam or something you're listening to. I believe that there are energetic forces in the world, like ghosts, like maybe shadow people and stuff like that. I like to believe that most specific, especially documented accounts of such things, here's a picture of a ghost, here's a video of a ghost, here's a picture of someone possessed by Jinn, are fanciful nonsense. That is, a religious or spiritual order is pushing it. Saint Brigida does this all the time in order to get like converts or donations or notoriety. Somebody is pushing the idea in order to offer services as an exorcist or a clairvoyant in order to make money, in order to make a living. Okay, make your living, but it's a little bit on the dishonest side, I suppose. It's sort of like the TV psychic. Miss Cleo, by the way, died a few weeks ago. It's rather sad. I was hoping that at the very least she'd put out like one last ad on the internet so we'd hear like her crazy voice again. Or it's made by a group of people as like a viral video thing. Like a lot of times, if you look through sort of the weird side of YouTube, you look at the paranormal videos. Oh, here's videos of werewolves and a saber-toothed tiger that's still roaming around Siberia, and here's a giant bear, and there's the monster of wherever, and the creature of Lake something or other, and all this stuff. Most of that stuff is not real. It's not real cryptids, it's not real spirituality, it's not real paranormal phenomena, it's certainly not real occultism. That being said, occasionally it is more difficult to explain. I've seen some footage that does not appear to be the normal fakery, let's face it, or just a trick of lighting, something like that. I would say with Jinn, most of the sources you're going to find on YouTube alluding to them at all are in Arabic, number one, and they appear to depict people whose stomachs are like undulating around and they're like flailing and making noises and stuff. It's not even clear always what's being said or even what's being reported on by the third parties that are actually present there and are actually talking at the time, because it's all in Arabic and oftentimes not translated by anybody into English. Even though if the claim is directly and explicitly made, oh, this person's possessed, it could be an act, it could be a video for attention-seeking purposes. It could be an attempt to proselytize, as in, oh, well, our religion can fight these spirits, be very afraid. What Christians think are demons aren't real, but what we think are demons really are, and they're actually called Jinn. They live in the desert or whatever, and you have to clean your nose out every morning to sneeze the Jinn out, which is actually a practice in some of these rural areas. Genies would be sort of similar, the idea of finding some sort of relic and then some being pops out and either grants you wishes or tries to destroy you or becomes like your spiritual ally or familiar or something. It really ties into the story of familiar spirits when you think about it, some sort of object. Sometimes others can see the genie, sometimes they can't. The genie only comes out under certain conditions, at certain times. You have to rub the lamp, you have to do something or other, perform some ritual to get the genie to come out. And it's all very like Arabian Nights style stuff. I don't believe in genies, obviously. It's actually funny, though. There are European sources that talk about magic carpets and things of that nature. And Hebraic sources, too, going back to sort of the Solomon and Cleopatra apocryphal works, Testament of Solomon sort of style stuff. That's not even really coming from Arabic sources for the most part. I know when we think of some of these things, when we think of Jinn, we think of Islam, we think of the today's Middle East. But in reality, the concept of sort of rural possessive spirits, especially living in stagnant water or in certain stretches of desert or certain hills that are considered desecrated or unholy or cursed in some manner, it goes back a lot further than Islam existed. The reason why it was so popularized is the pagans in Arabia already believed in these things. If you read the Testament of Solomon, you can see an apocryphal account of the spiritual crossover between the demonologist positions of the Hebraic people and early Christian movement and the Arabic pagans at the time, who weren't even Islamist in that era that's spoken of in the Testament of Solomon, in this sort of apocryphal material that's popularized in a non-canonical fashion. This story spread well beyond its point of origin. In fact, there is no specific point of origin. It's something that humans appear to have always held. You look at Mesoamerican lore, they believe in certain the Manitau and other spirits or corporeal beings living. The whirlpool has the Manitau in it, and this cave has this being in it, and that patch of forest over there has some being in it, and this rock formation has spirits living on it, and we see them at night and stuff like that. This is so common throughout the world that I have to believe that these phenomena are doing one of two things. Either some of them are true or none of them are true, and they're all witnessing strange phenomena that simply were explained in spiritual terms. In either case, though, they are still very strange phenomena. The concept of the will-o'-the-wisp, or phosphorescent fog in some bog or swampy location, or weird lights around the mountain, ball lightning, or static discharge, or heat lightning, or something like that. Weird creatures that are, not particularly common. Maybe they only come out a couple times a year from their subterranean layers. These things exist in the world, especially in aquatic regions, I would say. Aquatic regions and sparsely populated regions where humans have very little lasting presence. The idea, for instance, the Mongolian deathworm. Probably something we could talk about as far as a rural cryptid. It supposedly lives out in the middle of the Gobi Desert, where it rains once every couple years, and then they come out and they squirt acid at people. The fact that this being in some form or another could actually exist, there could be some sort of weird hibernating eel-like creature that does live in some of these steppe regions on the borders of those deserts. It is possible that that's the case, and maybe they come out to mate after it rains, and they're just particularly uncommon, long-lived, they hibernate a lot, and so people don't generally see them. Somebody goes out in the desert, doesn't come back. You could also say it's a cautionary tale. Oh, beware of this creature out here. And they used it as a way to explain why somebody who traveled out through the desert to go trade or hunt or whatever never came home. Oh, your father got killed by the death worms. He's been dissolved into a grinning skeleton. Sorry about that, kid. Something like that. Jinn are similar. Don't go out into this wasted space. Don't go out into this accursed peak. And oftentimes, these areas that are said to be accursed, they are dangerous locations. There's some outlands area, maybe there's a sheer cliff you can fall off, there's a cave you can get lost in, the forest is full of bears and wolves and stuff like that. Maybe if you go in, you get eaten alive, you don't come back out. Maybe it's a stretch of swamp that people thought was full of disease. They build a cautionary tale to keep people out of it. Sometimes this is done unconsciously, sometimes it was done for that specific sort of moral purpose. And at other times, that doesn't adequately explain it. For instance, with sort of ghostly phenomena, the small minority of cases that can't be explained as hoaxes or misidentifications, since they can't be explained, you can't fully discount the very concept behind, yes, remnant energy is capable of following a more or less ethereal-looking humanoid form, whether seemingly intelligent or not, and can actually be seen from time to time. Or the idea of certain cryptids, the idea that there are creatures, particularly large creatures, visible creatures, not microscopic, that we haven't accounted for, that have either, giant squid, something of normal proportions, Bigfoot, something that's marginally intelligent, almost human-like, and very out of place in the area where it's generally seen. You can't fully discount these things because humans often have a limited presence in the areas where these creatures are rumored to be. Now, in the old days, it was every forest had a dragon in it. Of course, that's no longer generally the case. We've pushed the mythological side of humanity to a few fallow areas where humans have very little presence. The far north and the far, like Antarctica, the Gobi Desert, the Sahara, some jungles, the Amazon Basin or the Congolese Basin, the northern forests of Canada or the regions of Siberia, or maybe like Upper Tibet or something like that, or some really deep, dark stretch of forest in Europe, the Carpathian mountain range or something like that, or, Appalachia. Here in Appalachia, spirituality is still more at the fore. You go to, like, Africa. A lot, even though the population there is booming right now, there's still a hell of a lot of rural areas that are basically just a bunch of little villages and towns in between them. There's a lot of jungle, there's a lot of rainforest, or there's a lot of desert and stuff like that in between the oases. So these traditions persist. You go to New York City, nobody talks about there being a secret cave of goblins in Central Park, now do they? totally different story, because there's so many humans wandering around the area. If there were such a thing, it would be encountered often, and potentially if there were a cryptid there, it'd probably end up getting killed if it was known to actually be there. As far as Jinn and Genies and ghosts, things like that, though they're less physical, they're considered a spiritual sort of aspect. So they aren't necessarily visible most of the time. Often, they're used as an explanation for some mental derangement. A person has a mental illness. They have a Jinn in them, we must treat them. Here, read this surah or whatever. The same is true with like the idea of demons in some deep Christian communities, some evangelical, like the Pentecostals, lay on the hands and pray and anoint the person with some peppermint oil or whatever because they're being caused sickness by a demon. They actually believe that these things are the case. I would debate most of these cases and say that I don't believe really in the concept of demonic possession. Because there'd be, according to my understanding of demons and demonology, the demon wouldn't care to harm an individual that it's attempting to use for some purpose because it's self-defeating. It wouldn't make sense. If these are intelligent beings and you believe in them, why would they do such a thing? It just wouldn't make sense. You're going by sort of the 2,000-year-old Jewish canon on this, that in turn comes from sort of the Babylonian Sumerian stuff. It could have been taken from, Zoroastrian or Persian tradition or something like that, or Egyptian tradition, and simply wasn't. The idea of henotheism adopted at that time. So I will say, as far as Jinn, if you look it up on like YouTube, most of the videos you're going to see are people role-playing that they're possessed, or videos of people that are mentally ill. You're not actually seeing a spiritual phenomenon there. You're seeing people who don't fully understand modern science attributing spiritual phenomena to something that is mundane. However, there's always that small minority of cases within any of these specific things, cryptids, ghosts, goblins, and dragons and stuff, that can't fully be explained or disproven, in which case it makes sense to remain at least agnostic on some of these specific reports of spiritual phenomena. That's about all. Peace out.